We've had this on the download for a while, but we wanted to share it with you. It's an incredible interview with a man lost. He's not around, but he handled metal that is not from this earth. It was crashed debris from 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico. And at the age of 76, Jesse Marcel Jr. passed away, but we were the last to interview him and get insight, so enjoy this exclusive interview. 1947 Roswell crash blown wide open like never before.
Dr. Marcel, can you tell us what it is that you saw when your father woke you up?
Well, he came into my bedroom. It was late at night, and he was very excited about something. I didn't know what it was, but he had my mother and myself come into the kitchen to look at some strange material that was on the kitchen floor that he had already distributed out there. And again, he was very excited. He said, "Why don't y'all take a close look at this? I think it's parts of I think he said flying saucer." And I wasn't quite sure what a flying saucer was at that moment, but I knew it meant something very strange. And he said, "This is one of those flying saucers that's been in the papers lately about, invading the skies over our country here." And again, he was very excited, and he said, "Look at all this stuff, and there's some metal debris on the floor. There's some members like little I-beams and some black plastic debris. And he said, first thing I want you to do is look for any electronic components like vacuum tubes, resistors, or condensers." But there wasn't anything like that, but he wanted me to satisfy my own curiosity there. So he said, "Take a look at this, and let me know what you think." And that's where it started.
Dr. Marcel, this is Blake Cousins. I want to ask you this question. Did your dad explain to you what compelled him to put this piece of unknown metal in his possession and bring it home to show you guys? What was he thinking in that state? Did he want to get it out so he wasn't the only one that knew about this and kind of wanted to share it with the family? Was that kind of his way of thinking?
Well, he wanted to share it with us because he knew this is something very strange and something that, like in his words, that we'd never see again. But he was quite convinced this was part of a flying saucer machine, and he wanted my mother and myself to look at this as part of a history, I guess. But again, that's what he was doing.
I want to ask this next question to Denise and then to you, Dr. Marcel. Within the family, after this event happened, what were you guys talking about? Now, clearly, everyone else on this show right now, minus Dr. Marcel, was not alive during this incident, of course. So this all is, we heard after the fact. So, Denise, what did you hear growing up?
Well, we were brought up from a really young age believing in UFOs. When we were, I think I was probably about 9 years old when he built this huge telescope in our backyard, and so he's always looking up at the stars. And when we would camp out at night, we would look up and see if we could see movement in the sky. So it was just, I don't know. I don't even know exactly how old I was. I was pretty young, I think. So it was just kind of something it was just always part of the family.
One other thing I wanted to ask you guys is, after this event happened, okay, the movie Roswell that was made by Showtime, it portrayed you when you were 11 years old, Dr. Marcel, that your father gave you some debris and then a couple of days later asked for it back. Did that really happen?
That was poetic license. It was just designed to make a good story better, but no, we didn't keep any of it, and my dad did not keep any of it and give it to me. So, no, we just turned it all in that evening after we finished looking at it.
I would have loved to have a piece of that to this day. That would have been the greatest thing. Yeah.
Wouldn't we all?
One major thing that's always insulted me, which I would think also would be a major insult to your father, your grandfather, Denise. When General Ramey decided to change the story, he had Jesse Marcel Sr. pose with this weather balloon wreckage when clearly it was switched. What did he say about being the fall guy after this? Because that's insulting to tell an intelligence officer, a major at that what he saw was misidentified as something so common I heard even dogs can recognize.
Well, I'm going to say that, he did Colonel Blanchard, who was the base commander at Roswell, wanted my dad to fly the material into General Ramey's office at Fort Worth to the station out there, because General Ramey was the 8th Air Force commander. And my dad flew the material in a B-29 under armed guard to General Ramey so he could examine this too. And, you know, I think that's where the cover-up started, because years later I saw a photograph of my dad holding a piece of obviously part of a Rawlin target, a radar target, which is obviously not what we saw in Roswell that night. But my dad was a good soldier. He was told not to talk about it, and indeed he was told to tell his family not to ever breathe a word about this again. And so when he got back from Fort Worth, he sat my mother and myself down and said, you know, look, treat this as a non-event. It didn't happen, understand? So you can't talk about it. I said, yes, sir, that's the way it is, and that's the way it stayed for years.
So let's talk about, you know, the darker side of government cover-up, disclosure, keeping secrets from the public that could possibly help mankind. What did you feel threatened? Did your father feel threatened about, you know, not getting this substance out to the public? And how far did they go in threatening your father?
Well, I don't know about any threats to him. Like I say, he was a good soldier, and he's followed orders, so they didn't have to threaten him actually to not talk about it. They said, Major Marcel, do not talk about this ever. And so he followed orders, and no threats implied there. But he knew that he had was given orders by a general, and he followed them.
Knowing what you know now, Dr. Marcel, when your father brought home this material, would you have, like the movie did in Showtime, would you have actually taken it in your possession, hid it somewhere safe, and maybe, you know, disclose it now? In hindsight, would you have kept some of the material?
No, I don't think so, because had I done that, I certainly wouldn't have it now, because word would have gotten out. I told my dad about it, and they'd have come and gotten it. As a matter of fact, Bill Brazel, who was the rancher's son, kept a little piece of it in his saddlebags there on the ranch there, and word got out that he had a piece of it, and some very official people came and got it for him.
You know, there was a recent FBI document that actually made the rounds in the 70s. Bruce Maccabee got it out through the Freedom of Information Act, but just recently it was revived through the FBI vault. It's an online repository of released documents where it said that there were up to 3 discs and up to 3 bodies per disc. Did your father see any other of the crash field, or did he ever talk about the alien bodies?
You know, he never saw those. At least he denied ever seeing them. Because later my wife asked him point blank a few years ago, did you see the bodies? And he said no, but he knew people who did see them. So what they did, they compartmentalized information. There was several sites there they're talking about. My dad was associated with the debris field, where there was just parts of the flying saucer there, and the main body of the craft must have come down some distance away. And the bodies, if they were there, that's where they were found. But my dad was not associated with that part of the craft.
When your father brought home the material, did it seem like a family event, like gather around, it's kind of Christmas Day, let's open up the presents? And if so, did it almost seem maybe proper enough? I'm not sure. Quite a long time ago, the cameras nowadays are a lot more readable. Did you have cameras in your home to take family photos, maybe take a picture of the metal itself?
Oh, I'm sure we had cameras. My dad was an amateur photographer too, but unfortunately we did not take any pictures of it. So all I can do is just relate what I saw spread out on the kitchen floor with my dad kind of hovering over, just jumping up and down with excitement.
You know, you recreated. Oh, go on.
How the metal responded and the characteristics of the metal. Like they say that it's flattened out. You could crumple it up like tinfoil, and it flatten out perfectly flat. Is this correct? And can you go into a little bit more detail on that?
Sure. Well, I didn't really witness that part of it. Because all I did was just hold it, and I didn't try to bend it or tear it or stretch it or anything like that. But my dad later described. Guys in his office tried to bend a piece of it with a sledgehammer, and it wouldn't stay bent. In other words, you could deform it, but it would pop right back out again. So, but unfortunately, I did not see that. But my dad talked about that later. So I have no doubt that it really was like that.
I was first exposed to this case in 1988, seeing that documentary, which included your father's testimony from Stanton Friedman from 1978, and he talked about that this debris could not be burnt, it could not be smashed, and he talked about all these characteristics that you were saying. But one thing that you were able to contribute to the ufology world and the whole general public was your recreation of this I-beam. And there were these symbols that you described as looking like Egyptian hieroglyphics. Now, there have been several other cases that people say the same thing. They've seen weird-looking symbols on there. They're not quite Egyptian, but they are some sort of symbols. There was a famous case, I'm sure you know this because you were at the citizen hearing, the Bentwaters case. Well, Sergeant Jim Penniston, when he came home, he actually drew, or actually at the site itself of this object, he drew the symbols on there. Have you ever compared the symbols on the I-beam to anything else?
Well, they were familiar with some of the other drawings that people have made. Again, they were, when I first saw that, they were written along the inner surface of this I-beam, like strut there. And there looked like purplish writing on it, purple, violet hued writing. And I thought at first it was Egyptian hieroglyphics, but it wasn't that. It was more like geometric symbols, truncated pyramids, balls, circles, triangles of various shapes, and just kind of imprinted on the inner edge of this thing. And in some respects, it did resemble some of the other symbols that people have drawn.
The metal retrieved, do you think it's in Area 51, or where do you think it would be located in present day? Well,
I just heard rumors that it was brought to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, and that may be where it is now. They may have divided it up among other areas too, like Area 51 or some air base someplace. But as far as I know, it's brought to Wright-Patterson Air Base, because I think there was a secretary there at the Wright-Patterson Air Base, June Crane. You may be familiar with her, and she described somebody bringing a piece of metal in, like what we saw, years later, and she's under strict orders to keep silent about that, so she didn't talk about that until she was on her deathbed, really. Well, I've seen some kind of strange things, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a genuine UFO, but they have, because if you look in the night sky, you can see all kinds of things. Like, for example, I was flying back from to Creek in Iraq to Balad, in a Black Hawk a couple of years ago, and you fly with the lights out, because you don't get shot down or somebody can see you. So we had just night vision goggles, and I saw this light floating over the desert going up towards Turkey, and it was traveling real fast. I knew that, what kind of aircraft is that? Because it had actually a visible light, and no one was flying around with visible lights at that time. So, but this is just a light in the sky, and God only knows what it was, but that's the strangest thing I've ever seen. In 1991, I was in Washington, where I was contacted by somebody in the Capitol to come talk to him about the UFO, that I saw in Roswell. So I went up there and we talked in a secure room where there was no recording devices or cameras or anything like that. And I asked him, when are you guys going to turn this stuff loose? And he says, we don't have it. And he said, it's in the hands of what he called the black government. These are people who are not elected. They have unlimited funds and answer only to each other. So I don't think the military has that much to do with it anymore. But it's in the hands of some clandestine, government agency.
Denise,
I think so too. Yeah, I completely, I 100% agree with that. I think it's when it comes to this kind of thing, there's probably a lot of money that wants to have that technology, and so they probably bought it or something. I think big corporations have got their hands into it.
We haven't come to the break yet. They might have changed the break schedule, which might be all for the better. But at that matter, let's just keep going on with this. let me ask you this, Dr. Marcel. You are a patriot, and you served in the military, and you are a true American hero for your service, and we honor you that. I just got to say one thing, though. Did you have any disdain for the military for what they did to your father?
No, actually not, because he kept things close to his chest, so he didn't really talk about it that much, and I know he stayed in the military several more years after that, and he got out to go take care of his mother in Louisiana. But again, it didn't seem to affect him that much. But again, he was like I said, a soldier who just followed orders and didn't really question them, as far as I know. Maybe in his own mind he did, but openly he did not do that.
Growing up, I'm sure, Denise, you saw this probably since you were taught. Dr. Marcel, they've probably come and interviewed. There have been several researchers ever since 1978 that have written books and that have made trips to Roswell even after you left to Montana, which what year was that, by the way, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, we moved here in 71.
Okay, and anyway, the point being, people were still investigating this, and they were coming to Roswell looking for the crash site, hoping that there might be some debris left, and I'm sure they were talking to other witnesses and coming back to you. Denise, what did you see growing up? Did you see all these investigators coming in and out or answering the phone of somebody who was calling to ask some questions about Roswell?
Oh, well, no, not really, because no, I didn't really hear. Where we grew up, it was we had one phone line, and it was like a party line. So a lot of calls, we weren't allowed on the phone that much because my dad was a doctor and he was busy with his practice, and there weren't a lot of people calling at that time. I don't think it really started to hit until I actually moved away from home, until like the later like the 80s is when it really, I think, really took hold. That's what I think. I mean, that's what it seemed like to me.
That would make sense, because in the 80s is when this really blew up and more witnesses started to come out, because they know that there's power in numbers. 1, 2, 3 people, sadly, knock on wood, I hate to say this, they can silence them in any way. As we know from Loretta Proctor and other witnesses that were truly threatened with their lives, who had nothing to do with the military, were just innocent witnesses that happened to be in, and I like to say the right place, but that was the wrong place for that being told. But there's scores and scores of people that have come out. Mr. or Dr. Marcel, have you been doing your own research on Roswell? What have you uncovered?
Well, I'm not a researcher. I'm just an observer of that one event there. But what it did do was trigger a strong interest in astronomy and cosmology. Like Denise said, I built a 14-inch telescope there in the backyard here in Helena. But I read a lot about astronomy, the new findings, the Kepler telescope that's finding planetary systems, widespread. So we know that there's, up to a few years ago, we had no idea that there were other planets outside of our solar system, but now they're finding them by the hundreds. So, most of these are not habitable, but some of them are quite Earth-like. And so that gives food for thought that, hey, if we're here on an Earth-like planet and there's others out there, so why not others just like us, who are maybe a little bit more advanced than we are and can travel the distances between the stars that we sure couldn't do right now. But I think that, there's a lot of research going on, a lot of reverse engineering, which is trying to find, bigger and better ways to fly airplanes and things like that. But but the technology is there, and it's just a matter of us reverse engineering it. And it may be very difficult to do that, because it'd be almost like giving Leonardo da Vinci a digital wristwatch and telling him to repeat it, to build one like it. And he couldn't do it because he didn't have the technology to do that. So we may have to advance further along the stream here to have the technology to be able to really reverse engineer to find out what kind of systems they use to travel interplanetary distances.
You hit the nail on the head. Actually, a famous researcher also said something very similar. If we gave Christopher Columbus a car or anything, grab a computer and said, here, you have an unlimited budget, go ahead and build it, there's no way he would have done it. I mean, he couldn't have done it because the technology hadn't progressed. Now, maybe in 1947, we weren't quite at the peak, but as you can see, I mean, if you said 20 years ago that you could stand on one corner of the planet and speak to somebody on the other corner of the planet, and while you're at it, take a photograph and maybe even see them video phone. I mean, if you said the smartphones would exist 20 years ago, everyone would have laughed. And now look at it. Everyone's traveling with a pocket computer, and we can do amazing things with this. Now, if this is what civilians are using, can you imagine what the military is using?
Oh yeah, it's you just can't imagine what the what research is developing now. I was in the military for about 35 years and got familiar with a lot of the technology, but boy, there's a lot under the covers that no one else knows about, and it's almost frightening to what our capabilities are now, military wise.
Are you familiar with Colonel Corser, and have you read his book, The Day After Roswell?
Yeah, Corso. Yeah, I didn't read it, but my wife Linda did, and he talks about reverse engineering and says that a lot of commonplace materials now, like transistors and where it came from, reverse engineering. And I don't really say no, but I guess I'm a little bit of a skeptic that way. But who knows? I don't discount anything.
What about you, Denise? Have you read his book, or have you read any other UFO-related books?
Oh, yeah, I have. It's been a while since I've read a UFO book. I did read his book. It was quite a while ago, to be honest with you, and I'm sorry, my memory's not 100% on that.
Well, I always thought this was probably interplanetary. It came from another solar system, and you talk about time travel. Theoretically, it may be possible. I know Mitch Kaku, a scientist, had a program about time travel the other day, but it seems like you can go into the future, but you can't go into the past with the time travel that we know about. There's the possibility of it, and with quantum entanglement of particles, which tend to defy the time sequence there. But I don't know. They may be interdimensional, like there's supposed to be other universes in other dimensions, like the multiverse type thing. But I guess I'm old enough now. I'm not really into that, but I kind of think that they're from our own galaxy or even other galaxies.